Is Washington seriously in the fold for another five-star recruit? Roman Tomashoff of Locked On Huskies is here to discuss. Brandon Arrington is one of my favorite recruits in the class of 2026 because he is one of the most unique recruits in the cycle. A true two-way guy, kind of Travis Hunter light. I think he's the first thing we've really seen or will see in college football since Travis Hunter that legitimately goes both ways. He happens to do it at the same positions of defensive back and receiver. I think he's DB first, receiver second, but can be really good at both. But at what felt like the last moment to me, Roman, where he had been in, he'd been considering, has been and continues to consider schools like Oregon, USC, Texas A&M, all in the full. All of a sudden, he was up at Washington. He was in Seattle, rocking the Husky gear on the OV. Is this a serious push, or is this him just going, well, you know, if they'll give me an official visit, sure, visits are fun.
No, absolutely. It definitely is. So, Spencer, first of all, you need to watch yourself some Celeste Moa film. That kid in Utah is also Travis Hunter-esque, plays both sides of the ball, wide receiver and safety. Another person who's on an official visit to Washington this past weekend, which kind of leads into, you know, some of the things that we can talk about with Brandon Arrington, where the elite speed on the track is one thing, but yes, Washington is seriously in this race, and he said so himself. He's been all over social media. Hey, don't sleep on Washington in my recruitment. I'm really, really impressed with everything I saw up there, and that's one of the things that I can't say I'm surprised by, because Washington, and especially secondary coach John Richardson, has pushed this DBU tradition that Washington really has gotten going over the last 5-10 years, really since, you know, Desmond Trufant, Marcus Peters. It goes way further back than that. But Washington has been one of the best schools in the nation at pumping out high-quality defensive backs over the last 10, 15 years. And Brandon Arrington has taken notice of that. And as he said in a recent interview with On3's Chad Simmons, he said, I'm looking for three things: who's going to recruit me the hardest, who's going to develop me the best, and who's going to get me on the field early. And especially those last two, Washington has a great case for. They might have the best cornerback in the nation this season in Tacario Davis, who was really impressive during his time at Arizona, especially under John Richardson, when he was second in the nation, I believe, with 16 pass breakups as a sophomore. And now having him back, that group back together for their senior season, it's going to be a big sell of, hey, look at how well I can develop these big, unique athletes, a lot like Brandon Arrington. And after this season, Washington's secondary, especially at corner, there's going to be a lot of questions. Everybody outside of junior Leroy Bryant is going to be a sophomore or younger on the depth chart. Well, I believe he's going to be a true sophomore next season, and Dylan Robinson is going to play in every game as a true freshman. I think that he might be penciled in as a starter. There is a lot of room for Brandon Arrington to get on the field early at Washington, and I think he's taking notice of that.
With the schools that are in the fold, and I know you mentioned the points that didn't bring up NIL, but I want to talk about that angle of it because It's a factor for anybody that is this highly rated of a recruit. He may very well, you know, value above all else the development, the playing time, and all that sort of stuff. And I think that's the right way for high school recruits. If I had a kid or knew somebody that was going through the process, that's where I'd tell them to focus. Like, get the football right, discuss the NIL after the fact. But let's say, Roman, it comes down to Oregon, Washington, USC. He wants to stay on the West Coast. And I'm just throwing a hypothetical out there. USC has reportedly made significant upgrades to their NIL efforts. It's paying off on the trail. We all know that Oregon is a tier 1 NIL school in college football. If it were to come down to that, where that's the only real differentiating factor between the three places, do you feel like Washington's in a position to where they could offer at least a comparable amount to what Oregon and USC might?
So I would have to say yes, because I brought up Celeste Moa a little bit ago to just kind of go back to that point. Washington has done a really good job, especially in year 2 under Jed Fish, getting some of these high-value prospects on campus. They had a top 100 recruit in 4-star wide receiver Vance Spafford, who's committed to Georgia, up on campus last weekend for an official visit. They've had they're inviting a couple of Texas A&M commits, and you know we know how that goes with NIL. In Madden Williams, who was here last weekend, and then 4-star edge rusher from Southern California, who's also committed to them. That's coming up this weekend as well for an official visit. And if you are able to compete with, you know, those, just the likes of those schools and able to earn an official visit, you have to be somewhat competitive in the NIL space. It doesn't matter at all for this discussion, but I think in the same sense it does, because it's a different sport. College basketball. Washington was one of the highest spenders through NIL in the transfer portal for college basketball. Yep. And that's something that just shows, hey, this school has all of the resources to compete for these high value prospects. We've already seen them pull off a big time flip in 5-star offensive tackle Cody Green, stealing him away from Oregon, where Washington is certainly as ready to compete as anyone in the NIL space, because there is so much to offer in terms of, the Fortune 500 companies that are in the area and everything, which is something that Jedd Fisch has, made no secret about since he's gotten here.
Elsewhere on the recruiting trail for Washington, obviously pulling Arrington, especially with how, relatively late it feels like they've gotten into the fold compared to everybody else that's going after him. That would be a big time splash. But Washington is doing solid things on the trail. Top 25 class according to 24/7 right now. Do you feel like they have the ability to get, let's say, inside the top 15 when the 2026 cycle is all said and done, whether they get Arrington or not?
I believe they do, and it's going to come down to one thing and one thing alone. That's defensive line recruiting. That's the overhaul that Washington needs to make the most of on the trail this year, no matter what. You're losing 13 scholarship guys at the position over the next 2 seasons. So they want to make sure they address that right away. They get out in front of it. And they're in the mix for a lot of big-time guys. A couple ones that I want to point to in particular. One of them, who is one of my favorite recruits to watch on film in this entire class, is 4-star T.I.U. Mukais from Cherry Creek High School in Colorado, who's going to be up here this weekend for his official visit. 4-star David Schwerzel from O'Day High School here in Seattle has set his commitment date for June 19th.
Shout out O'Day. Shout out O'Day. It's where my cousins went to high school, so I always got to shout them out any chance I get.
I absolutely respect that. I got some great friends that went there as well. And he's got a crystal ball to choose Washington as well. Another guy who Washington's competing with Ohio State and Notre Dame for is 4-star defensive lineman Kari Wilder from down Southern California. And if you're able to have that be the anchor of your class, along with the number one player in the state of Washington in 4-star defensive lineman Derek Coleman-Brusa, you're in a really, really good spot at that position. And 4-star guys along the defensive line, that's a tongue twister, really. That's something that really can be the anchor of a top 15 class.
Coleman-Brusa is number one defensive lineman in Washington, right? Because Cody Green's got to be the top overall player in the state, isn't he?
No, he plays at Mater Dei down in Southern California. He's a top 5 player in California. That's right. But he's got ties to coaches that are up in the Seattle area. He started his career up here. That's right. He played his first 2 years at Eastside Catholic.
That's right. Okay. I knew there was some tie to him in the Seattle area. Still, I will jot that down as what my high school history and government teacher, Mr. Noble, will call a moment of cerebral flatulence.
Another shout out. There you go.
Brain fart. Yeah, exactly. You never forget where you come from. Obviously, that's how I roll. That's how Roman Tomashoff rolls. Locked On Huskies. Great work as always, my man. Appreciate the insight. Appreciate everybody listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.